If you're weighing a yarn cake like this, you just put it on a scale like this, and you can just see what the weight is, and you're basically done. However, spinners are putting yarn onto bobbins, and a lot of times you want to know the weight of yarn on the bobbin because that's a good estimation for how long the yarn is, and you need a certain amount of yarn to finish a project. So this video is going to be getting into a bunch of different methods of measuring the yarn weight on a bobbin. And we're going to go from the most basic methods to a more sophisticated solution that I think improves the workflow. So definitely watch to the end to see those more clever methods. If we just weigh the bobbin, we get 11.55 ounces, but that's not correct because that includes the weight of the bobbin. So we need to subtract the weight of the bobbin. And with my bobbins, all of the bobbins of the same type are going to be the same weight. So we can just use this weight, and you'd subtract the weight of the bobbin from the weight of the bobbin with the yarn, and you'd have the weight of the yarn. However, many scales have this tare feature, and what that does is that sets the weight to 0 with an item sitting on the scale. So you use the empty bobbin, hit tare, it zeroes it out. Now if you take it off, you generally will see a negative weight like that, and that's the weight of the actual bobbin. Now we put the bobbin with the yarn on there, and we see that the weight of the yarn is 7.95 ounces. And that works great if you have a scale with this tare feature. Now, you'll notice that most scales do a calibration step when you turn them on. So if you don't have a scale with tare on it, but it has that calibration step, then it's most likely a load cell. And they do that calibration because the scale weight changes greatly with temperature. So they need to recalibrate it each time you turn it on. But we can use that feature by putting an empty bobbin on and turning it on. And it measures 0 because it's calibrated that to be its 0 weight. And we remove that and we get the negative weight of the bobbin. And now you can get this 7.95 ounces of the yarn without using the tare feature and without doing math yourself. So if you don't have tare, then that's a little hack. Now the next way to improve your efficiency is to measure the yarn while it's on your eSpinner. But in order to do that, we need to put the eSpinner on the scale with an empty bobbin. And then we hit this tare feature just like before. You know, it feels like we know what we're doing. Then after you've spun a bunch of yarn onto your bobbin, you just look at the weight on your scale after hitting that tare feature, and it's back to 7.95 ounces, the correct weight for the amount of yarn on that bobbin. But there's a problem with this, and that problem is how this tare feature actually ends up working. So on modern scales, they do this recalibration step every time you turn them on, and it basically resets this tare feature. Now there are some high-end scales that don't do this or let you save tare values for production references and things, but those are going to be high-end industrial commercial kind of scales, and they're going to be expensive. You're not going to have that on your scale at home. So we have to figure out a way to do that. And you might be thinking, oh, we probably have to go back to doing the math. So let's here, let me show you. So if we, hit the power button, and most scales will end up turning off automatically. So you wouldn't even be able to spin all of your yarn before it resets, but it'll reset back to 0. So we put the whole eSpinner back on, and we'd have to remember the weight, probably wrote down the weight of your eSpinner with an empty bobbin and subtract it away, and you'd get the weight on your bobbin. However, there is a better way. So in order to do this improved method, we need to go back to an empty bobbin, and we're seeing, the weight of the eSpinner with an empty bobbin there. But the trick is, if you could get that to an even number, say 40 ounces, then it would make the math very simple. And what I've got here is just a plastic jar I had in the kitchen, and I added water until it makes the weight exactly 40 ounces. And that's really all there is to the trick. So now we're back to the eSpinner with this bobbin on it. And if you remember, that's 7.95 ounces of yarn on that bobbin. And right now it's reading some number, which we'd have to subtract the weight of the eSpinner and an empty bobbin, but instead we just put this container on here and it reads 47.95, and we can remember this container makes the eSpinner plus an empty bobbin weigh 40 ounces, so it's just this 7.95 ounces is the weight of the yarn on that bobbin. So all you need to do is come up with a weight like this, and it makes measuring the weight of yarn on your bobbin super simple. I hope you found that useful, and thanks for watching.